Okay, I couldn't let this go. I'd intended to include this in my last video and I overlooked it. But I mentioned regarding the Tiananmen Square crackdown, the government's attempts to censor information from the Chinese people. I'm going to give an example of that evidence. This is history of China. It's from the Chinese Education Ministry. It's in English. A friend gave it to me. Um, Foreign Languages Press actually is technically the Foreign Languages Press Beijing 2010. Now, it kind of goes in a timeline format. And when you look at ancient history, we have Song Dynasty, Ming Dynasty, and so on. It's just a standard account of history, nothing particularly controversial there. Sort of talking about all sort of heritage sites and so on. Okay, now I'm going to show you the article for 1989. This is covering major events, right? This is interesting. Show you, hopefully it'll be clear. So remember the period we're talking about, June 1989, right? Okay, 1988 there. Flip it right, I'll try and get, let's see. There we have May 1989. Normalization of Sino-Soviet relations. That's talking about the visit of Mikhail Gorbachev. In fact, one reason it's thought that the Deng regime put off the crackdown was they didn't want an embarrassment in front of Gorbachev's visit, so they waited until he left. Okay, so that's talking purely about Gorbachev's visit. The date there is May the 18th. June the 23rd, Jiang Zemin elected General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. This is after the crackdown. Okay. So there we go, May the 18th, June the 23rd. So they totally gloss over the events of June the 4th to June the 6th. They totally gloss over it. Not even to say the government puts down violent uprising or something like that. They just totally exonerate the event. Why? You have to ask yourself why. It's because they want the Chinese people to not know the truth. It's as simple as that. If they were innocent, if they were putting down a violent uprising, they would tell the Chinese people the truth. This is more recent history. 2007, Scientific Outlook on Development. A lot of this is kind of party statutes and anniversaries. 60th anniversary of the founding of the PRC, 2009. Um, Opening of the 29th Olympic Games in Beijing, that was a big one, of course. The Sichuan earthquake they cover. They cover other big things, and they cover a lot of internal party promotions, that sort of thing. But they totally ignore the events of June 1989. Um, and this, I'm not saying this is what Chinese students get, but that's an example. I've seen Chinese textbooks, um, and the sad thing is, millions of young Chinese are growing up just not knowing about this. Now, some of my students, I don't know how they found out whether they had VPNs or, but some of them were aware of it. And I was really humbled by the bravery that I heard from these young people, by the willingness to be that open minded to acknowledge that. I remember one young guy came up to me and said, "Teacher, I know the situation in China is very dark." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "I know this is a communist country." And I was a little taken back by that. It's definitely not what I expected, and this was outside. So I kind of said, it's great you're open minded, and that's great, but just I did tell him to be careful because I certainly didn't want it to look like I was, being a foreign agitator or something. And just for the record, I always obeyed the rules there. I never spoke about politics in class or anything like that, nor would I have done. But that gave me a little glimmer of hope. But these were just a few students. The vast majority of students In the CNN report when they were covering the commemorations of Matt Rivers' report, they were covering like a model in Taiwan, Taipei, Taichung actually, I think it was, and Chinese tourists would come up and say, "Who is that? What is this?" It's just it's tragic that young Chinese just don't know. Many of them just don't know and those that do know tend to get fiercely defensive of the party because that's the way they've been brought up. It's all they've ever known. So young Chinese in the West very often are, no, this is all Western propaganda, it's all Western lies. Or one I heard was the students were idiots. This is the sort of mentality that's it's just tragic. Today we mark well, tomorrow we mark the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings, which was about liberty and about freeing a continent from oppression. And yet today, the world's second biggest economy still has 1.4 billion people under a totalitarian system. It's very sobering. That's why I really believe that the world needs to be very assertive when it comes to Beijing.